Good morning and welcome to the Public Works Contracting Series number 2. This session is on tips on risk mitigation. My name is James Forrest. I'm the program coordinator for Norcal PTAC. And then we have Ed Duarte, who is the construction public works specialist with Norcal PTAC as well. We're very happy to be here. Norcal PTAC is the Northern California Procurement Technical Assistance Center. We are a nonprofit program, part of a network of centers across the country. What we do is we help small businesses and really any size business that needs assistance get government contracts. We help you do your best to be competitive in the government marketplace. We are funded by the Defense Logistics Agency. That's a federal agency, the DLA, and we're hosted. We also get state and local funds from other sources, especially California GoBiz. We are hosted by the Humboldt State University Sponsored Programs Foundation, located up where that red star is on the top of the map there. And our service area includes all the counties you see on the map in green, including the 9 counties of the Bay Area. In 2020, which was a difficult year for many, we helped our clients win $314 million in very well needed and well deserved government contracts. And that was nearly twice as much as we did in 2019. So our services don't cost anything. So we can help you get contracts and succeed with your business. It doesn't cost you anything. So the 3 ways that we get this done for the most part are with one-on-one counseling. So we have a team of procurement specialists. Ed is one of them, and they can meet with you remotely to go over just about any topic you can think of that relates to government contracting. So certifications, marketplace research, preparing capability statements, understanding the nitty-gritty, for instance, of risk and mitigation in public works, all of these sort of things. Second thing we do is custom bid matching. So for our clients who are signed up for one-on-one counseling, if I put an application on our website, we can set you up with a bid match profile. So you work with your procurement specialist, you figure out some criteria of the things that you want to sell, goods and services. Then you put it into the system and voila, every morning you are receiving bid notifications in the mail with a list of bids that theoretically should match what you sell. And then you can choose whether you want to bid on them. This helps you stay on top of all of those opportunities that are out there that you might not find otherwise. Third thing we do, as you're seeing today, are resources and trainings. So during normal times, we put on workshops in person as well as webinars. These days, as you might guess, we're doing 100% webinars, but we're constantly putting on more topics and putting out content, both ones that we host as well as ones that we partner on with host organizations. So we have a lot of partners that we join and we host, and we also go out and join other folks' events. You can check all of this out at our website, norcalptac.org. I know I'm a little bit biased because I'm the program coordinator, but the website is very cool, chocked full of good resources. And I encourage you to go check it out. So the calendar, the event calendar's on there. I'm going to go over a couple of calendar events later today. But it is really, really helpful to see everything that we're posting. Because like I said, it's not just our own events, it's other events that we think might be helpful for our clients. There's also tons of resources. This is also where you will find all of the webinars that we have done in the past several years archived. You get the slides as well as the video recording that's uploaded to YouTube. So that is at norcalptac.org/webinars. That's where this recording and these slides will be going later today as well. So you don't need to worry about taking notes if you don't want. You're going to get all these slides with the hyperlinks and everything. If you are not in our service area and you're looking at this map and you're like, oh no, I'm in Tehama County or I'm in Santa Cruz County, don't worry about it. That's fine. You are probably in the district of another PTAC. So there are 94 PTACs across the country, and you can find your local PTAC at www.aptac-us.org/findaptac. So go ahead and take a look and sign up for our services. PTACs in general don't charge for one-on-one counseling services. So I do hope that we see your application in our queue one day. We look forward to assisting you if you're not already a client. Just another note, I've put our phone number there. That goes right to me, and the info address that we have as well. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Questions about the application, etc. So we are partnered with the SBDC for events this year. That is the Small Business Development Center of Northern California. The Northern California Small Business Development Center is a nonprofit network as well, and they're made up of 18 centers, and they're dedicated to helping small businesses with every aspect of business creation, growth, management, and operation. So we do procurement. We only do procurement. We don't do grants. We don't do loans. We don't do startup assistance. We don't do business plans, but we get really into procurement. Norcal SBDC, they kind of do everything. So if you need help getting your business up and running, I would suggest going to them first. Once you're on the ground running, you got a couple quarters of sales under your belt, come to us. You can find your local SBDC by clicking on that link once you get the slides later. I also find it tends to work if you just Google the county that you're in and then type in SBDC. So Shasta County SBDC, it'll come up with the Shasta Cascade SBDC. Both organizations have COVID-19 web pages, which I think is really helpful these days, both in how to respond, how people are responding to the COVID pandemic in helpful ways, and ways to sell goods and services that were required for pandemic response. All right, I think with that, we are going to hand things over to Ed once I just give a little bit of a housekeeping note here. If you guys have any questions about the presentation today, please enter them into the Q&A window. So I think you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there should be a chat, raise hand, and a Q&A window. The Q&A is what we want to use for content. So if you put a question in there, Ed will be reading it aloud at the end of the webinar. If you have a technical issue or you want to network or say hi, you can put it into the chat and I'll answer it there by typing. So, and once again, another note that we're recording this and anything you say can be used. The recording as well as the slides will be sent to will be posted to YouTube and posted to our website. So you'll be able to find those later today, norcalptach.org/webinars. Okay, I think let's hand things over to Ed. Ed is our construction public works specialist with Norcal PTAC. He's been with us for quite a while and he is premier expert in this field. So you're in excellent hands with him. Thank you so much, Ed, for all the research and work you've put into this.
Thank you, James. Well, good morning, everybody. As James has pointed out, we've got a team of people that can help small businesses in their procurement marketing efforts. My specialty happens to be with the construction side. And as most people know who go into the contracting business, the public works arena it's huge. The government has a lot of money to spend, and they're going to be spending more. So outfits like Caltrans and BART and County of San Francisco and Contra Costa County and the water districts and the school districts, there are a lot of construction projects that are going to be coming up over the next 5 years. However, for the newcomers to that industry, if you've never been a contractor but you've got the experience of working in the trades, and now you have a license and you have a company, you're going to find it's a little different than having your tool belt on and pouring the concrete and pounding nails and putting up steel. Being an owner, being a construction company owner is a whole different ballgame. That's where I come in. I'm a retired civil engineer and general contractor. Our family has been in the business since 1950. We're in our third generation. And my little bit of trying to help out and maybe give back is that after 55 years of working in the public works arena, I've absorbed a lot of information that you only can get by, like they say, been there, done that. So I do a series of workshops throughout the year, and these are aimed specifically at the construction companies, the contractors who are licensed by the state of California and who can bid and build a public works construction contract. That includes the subcontractors, obviously. I also do a lot of work with A&E firms and construction management firms because our company also does construction management. In putting together this workshop, as I mentioned on Tuesday, Tuesday's subject matter and today's subject matter, I used to only give maybe 10 to 15 minutes coverage in my regular project management and estimating workshops. And I had a lot of people continue to ask more questions to get a little more detailed, because sometimes, as when you do this long enough, you assume that everybody is at least familiar with the general terminology and what we do. And that's not always the case, especially with the new contractors. So what I'm going to talk about today is a focus on something that most, if not all, new contractors are completely unaware of. Estimating is an acquired skill. It's 50% mathematics and 50% acquired skill of analyzing sub-bids, material pricing, looking at the plans and specs, and trying to figure out, putting together a competitive and comprehensive bid proposal. So what I'm going to talk about today is, when you look at the plans and specs, what else do you need to be thinking about before you even start doing any quantity takeoffs, estimating of the labor hours, contacting subcontract, etc. What happens when what are things that could happen when we look at a set of plans? So this overview is, it's very important for a contractor to consider all the risk issues that could affect the successful outcome of the project. As I've said in workshop after workshop after workshop, we don't write the contract. We don't prepare the bids and the plans and specifications. Everything is done by the owner or the owner's rep or the owner's designers. So we take what's given to us and we have to figure out how to build it and make some money, or more importantly, not lose any money. So the most successful contractors are the ones who examine and assess any items of risk and what cost impact they could have on building the project. For each of those items, a decision must be made to quantify and or assign a cost value to that item of risk. This process is a learned skill, and it comes with experience. The new contractors that can do this are more than likely, if in fact, and most probably, spin-offs. They've been a project manager, they've been a project engineer, they might even have been a general superintendent or a vice president of construction operations for a larger company. So they know about all of this stuff, and when they spin off from the big company and start their own company, they at least have a general idea of what they're going to look at. For you new contractors that have not done that, this is a skill that you really need to be thinking about. That's why I've decided to devote about an hour to talking about this overview. Next slide, please. Well, what are we concerned about? What are we looking for? What could be risky? Well, a lot of things could be risky. As I said, that contract is written with the owner's well-being in mind, not ours. And I say ours because even though I'm retired, I still worry about my family business. So if the bid documents are unclear or ambiguous or even an actual error, this will manifest itself by the fact that a lot of addendums are issued right up to the day before bids are due. An old contractor that a good friend of mine, we talked about it, and my father told me the same thing, that if you have more than 4 or 5 addendums being issued by the architect or the engineer, it's pretty clear this job is really not ready to bid out. It really shouldn't be on the street, but it's out there for a multitude of reasons. Number one is that the owner wants the thing built, and they've got a time frame and maybe a budget requirement that has to be a timeline for a grant or the end of the fiscal year. There's a lot of reasons why a set of plans will hit the street and they're really not ready to bid out. Well, what does that do? What does that mean to us as a contractor? The impact is, if they're not really ready to bid out, then there's probably going to be more disputes than we care to think about over potential change orders. That's going to require a lot more project manager time, superintendent's time, negotiating with the architect and the engineer. The architect doesn't want to hear that his plans aren't perfect. Well, as I learned long ago, A&E firms put on their pants one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. They are human. They can make errors. And the fact that they have a PE or an AIA behind their name and the college degree does not mean that when they issue a set of drawings, they are ready to bid out. So it's going to require a lot more documentation in RFIs, requests for information. What's another sign, another red flag? The architectural details are incorrect, contradictory, or even non-applicable. Happens all the time. We go to the door schedule and it says that all the doors are going to be 3070, meaning 3 feet wide, 7 feet tall. We go over to the elevation drawings and we see that we've got 2 doors in there that are 2'8" by 6'8". Well, which detail is correct? The drawing or the door schedule? Same thing with a window schedule. Same thing with a hardware schedule, or a generator that's been specified that model number is not even being manufactured anymore. These types of errors happen all the time. And it's not because the A&E is necessarily incompetent or a bad designer. A lot of times they're under pressure and they're forced to get these drawings. The owner's telling them, we want those drawings on the street. We want this job bid out. Well, as I said, the buck stops with the contractor. So you need to be aware that if you're seeing these kind of red flags about the architectural details and a lot of addendums, there's going to be problems on this job. So just factor that into your approach when you're preparing your estimate. A third item, the budget is unrealistic. This is a really big deal. If the owner doesn't have sufficient funds, a lot of things happen. Number one, as you know, well, maybe you don't know, but with all public works jobs, usually 95% of the time or more, the agency or the owner's rep will advertise the job, and they will publish the estimated budget, the estimated cost. They'll say, we want a new 5,000 square foot child care center for the school district, and our estimate is 2.75 million. Okay, that sounds fine. But supposing that estimate is way low, and who's to judge that? I had an owner one time tell me that a job that we bid on, we were close to $500,000 over the estimate, and we left a lot of money on the table between us and the second bidder. And that city's project manager had the gall to tell me, he says, but our construction manager prepared the estimate and they say this job should be bid for $500,000 less. And I said, well, are they a contractor? And they said, no, it's a construction manager. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but they're not in the business of pricing labor and equipment and materials 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. We are. And I'll remind you that we left $500,000 on the table, and there's a third bid even higher. So don't tell me my bid should have been even cheaper. Well, because it was a FEMA grant, they had to award us the job. Not only did it require our bid to finish the job, we got another $250,000 in change orders. It was a lousy set of drawings. So that's what an example is where our bid, while low, was way over the budget, which was unrealistic. A more costly scenario is you as a bidder, you bid this job and you know what the budget, you know, you've bid other projects that are quite similar in scope, and they consistently are coming in at quite a bit, 30 or 40% over this particular project advertised budget. So if you decide to bid it and you are low and the owner does not have the funds, then the job's going to have to be rebid. And all that estimating effort will have been for naught. And not only that, as the low bidder, your number's now on the street because, and I think most of you know, all public works contracts, all bids are public knowledge. In fact, they're available on the day that the bids are received. So if the budget's unrealistic, you bid it, you're low, and the owner says, well, the bid is over the estimate, so we're canceling the job or we'll put it out to rebid later. You're up a creek, and you spend a lot of time and money for bidding the job, to bid the job. And again, if you want to come back and do the rebid, just remember, everybody knows your first number. So it has a direct impact on the contractors. The fourth item is the schedule is unrealistic. The construction time allowed and or the time allowed to prepare bids. Let me deal with the one about the time allowed to prepare bids first. It always irritates me, and I look with a raised eyebrow at the school jobs that are put out to bid. Excuse me, they're put out to bid in February, March, and April, and the job has to be completed before school starts. Well, again, if you have any kind of experience in public works projects, it takes 4 to 6 weeks to allow to award a project after the bids are taken. So if you're bidding a job in April, you'll be lucky if you can allow to start on June 1, and then you've got to be done by August 25th. So that time allowed to prepare the bid the job should have been put out for advertising back in January, February, number one. Number two, if you question the school district about that, a lot of times the architects will tell you, well, I haven't had enough time to prepare the drawings. They have more time than we have. They have 4 to 6 months to prepare. That's what it takes to prepare a complete set of construction documents. And then they want us to bid the job in 2 weeks and then bid it and build it in 90 days. So when that schedule is unrealistic, the impact is pricing, obviously. If it's a compressed time schedule, then you better be aware that you're going to have to bid some overtime in the job. There's also well, I'll come back to, there's another item that ties to that. So Time allowed to prepare bids, another example on that is the larger jobs, say, for example, the water and wastewater treatment plants, or the mega projects, the 25, 30, $40 million jobs. What you'll find is that the sophisticated owners and designers who realize the complexity of those types of projects, it's not at all uncommon for them to allow 4 to 6 to 8 weeks just for the contractors who put their bids together, for the obvious reason. There's just a whole lot of outreach for subcontractors, material suppliers, equipment suppliers, and putting together a massive bid like that is, it requires more time. Next item. Proprietary specs. Well, what does that mean? It means no competition is allowed. A good example of that is fire stations. Quite often, and we bid and built a lot of fire stations. You look at the plans and specs, you look at the specification for the overhead doors, the roll-up doors, and they say we want XYZ model manufactured by X, AB products, model number so-and-so. No substitutions are allowed. And that's completely understandable, because fire districts usually have most of them have more than one station. And for maintenance purposes, they would like to have parts available and interchangeable. So they want all their roll-up doors to be by the same manufacturer with the same model number, so that it's easier to service. That's fine, totally understandable. But when you do a proprietary specification, and in other words, no comparable other product is allowed, this note, it applies to us, but the impact is really more so to the owner. And sometimes we're the ones that have to explain it. When there's no competition allowed, guess what? Prices can go up. And even though the manufacturer's rep is telling the architect or engineer, oh yeah, with these doors, all the contractors are going to get the same price. It's going to be, $2,500 a door. Well, on bid day, we all get our bids from this one manufacturer of the roll-up doors, and they're $3,200. And there happen to be 8 doors on this. It's a 2-station project. It has an impact on the budget. So proprietary specifications, no substitution allowed, it has an impact. And the impact to us is that we have to manage that pricing, which can vary and usually will go up. When you do your job walk, we find out that it's a difficult site to access. And guess what? Other contractors are working on other portions of the project that the owner has under separate contract. Well, the obvious impact is logistics become difficult, productivity can be affected. So you have to take that into account as you prepare your labor estimate. Next one is the owner is to furnish key items of equipment that are on critical path. So what do I mean by that? Well, supposing it's a chain, again, let's use the fire stations, and they're going to do 2 stations, and because they already have 6 stations in operation, and all of them have the same generator, they say, well, we're going to save some money and save the contractors markup on the generator, because these are like $25,000 to $35,000 items. And they say, we will buy them and give them to the contractor, and the contractor has to install them. And the plans and specs will show that. Generator to be furnished by owner, contractor to install. Well, we have no control on the delivery schedule. And something like a generator, you don't get overnight. We don't have any any leverage over the supplier, because they're not working for us. they got paid by the owner. And if the owner hasn't got somebody that knows what they're doing and is monitoring this and makes sure that the model number that's delivered is the one that meets the specifications, things can get out of whack very easily. Same thing goes for when they're subcontracting directly with a large key subcontractor, an HVAC contractor or a plumbing contractor or a site work contractor. We did a large job for an owner that they had the site work going on under a separate contract. And we're supposed to be working our buildings in the middle of the site. Needless to say, the logistics became a little hectic. So again, for those two items, when the owner's involved, the leverage, the lack of leverage has got to be factored into your pricing by your approach on how you're handling equipment, installation, and of course, all the labor involved. Next slide, please. This is next one is no pre-coordination of utility companies. And when we say utility companies, we're talking about, as far as our Bay Area is concerned, we're talking about PG&E, and we're talking about the water districts, water and sewer districts. It's the designer's responsibility to be talking to PG&E and the water and sewer districts way in advance of that job being put out to bid. They have to have what they call a notice of intent letter for notice of intent to deliver the necessary utility. It's sad to say, but everybody in the industry knows that, and I mean everybody. PG&E is extremely difficult to work with, and it doesn't matter how big the agency is that you're working for on your prime contract. If someone hasn't been talking to PG&E way before this job goes out to bid, there is risk that on the day that we're all finished up and we're ready to flip on the power, if that transformer hasn't been set and power brought to the transformer so our electrician can take it from there. Same thing with the gas. You can't turn on the building. And everybody gets unhappy, and in some cases, not often, but in some cases, the owner beats over the contractor and says, well, you didn't finish on time. And that is, it's a very sore subject with most contractors because we have no control over PG&E, and it doesn't matter how big or how small you are. They work at their own pace, and it's something that you absolutely need to prepare for. An inexperienced or an unsophisticated owner. Well, we see that not as often as we used to, because most owners now are going to bringing in construction managers to kind of oversee the project, and that has reduced the amount of poor decision making, but it still happens. So just be aware. You might want to do a little research on the owner and see how many projects they put out to bid. I remember we worked for a school district years ago, and the business manager for the school district was a middle school principal, and they had absolutely no idea what was going on. And they were being advised by the architect, who was not the best architect. It was not a fun job. Just a lot of things happened that shouldn't have happened. The next one is always a touchy subject. There's onerous language in the general conditions about the architect engineer's authority over matters of dispute and contract administration. Well, That can vary from minor to super major. What do we mean by onerous language? Well, for example, it might have to do with change orders. And the change order, it says the change order language and the general conditions might mention something about the architect and engineer having the final authority over the determination of the contractor's cost, which is legalese for telling us, if you tell us it takes this many hours to do this work on this change order, and we think it should take less, end of discussion. Our decision is final and non-disputable, unappealable. That type of language, it indicates to me you've got an A&E firm that has got an attitude problem. And if the drawings are, as our first slide, if the drawings are not the best, there's going to be change orders, and you're probably going to take it. You're probably going to get shorted on cost because they're going to be chiseling back on every price. I'm not exaggerating when I'm talking about this particular item. This happens all the time, and it's a question of integrity with the A&E firm, integrity of the owner's rep, the CM, integrity of the contractor. You can have a perfect storm where everybody's got a chip on their shoulder and the job is just nothing but a lot of arguments and ultimately winds up in lawsuits. Let me give you a, let's see, James, go to the next slide, and then we're going to come back real quick. Okay, come back, please. In this onerous language, for those of you who don't know, an RFI is a request for information, and that's a question. That's when we submit a question to the designer, and we say, "You're concerning detail number so and so on sheet so and so, where the column bid attaches to the upper beam. We're questioning blah blah blah," and we don't get an answer in the time allotted per the contract. The contract is supposed to state that the A&E must respond within 10 days to any RFI that the contractor submits. And what happens in a lot of those instances is that the architect or engineer, for whatever reason, just dawdles around and never answers the question. And pretty soon that question, where that column intersects the overhead beams, becomes a point of delay on the work. And now the contractor is saying, I asked you about this a month ago. I didn't get an answer. We're out there putting this thing up now, and it's not working. I'm gonna submit a request for additional compensation. And the A&E just tries to cover their tracks and finds out that, yeah, we should have answered this. Had they answered it, there wouldn't have been a problem. Well, those types of questions and what we call the RFIs, the more RFIs there are on a job, the more probability, the higher the probability there's going to be an issue. And let me give you a very classic public knowledge example. If you're aware of the Grand Central Station, the transportation center in downtown San Francisco, I believe it was right at about $3.5–4 billion. A mega project to the nth degree. There were over 14,000 RFIs submitted by the contractor to the architects and engineers on that project. And 14,000 RFIs resulted in a claim for $150 million against the city and the Transportation Authority. And that job's still in litigation. They haven't settled that. Now, we're not talking about a contractor who doesn't know what they're doing. Our trade newspapers have been following that case, and you're talking about, it was a joint venture of two of the biggest contractors in the world, in the United States anyway, that built that project. And that $150 million claim, maybe it's not worth 150, but I'll guarantee you it's worth at least 100. I mean, you just can't have 14,000 RFIs. What does that mean? That means that's the number of questions that were never answered about issues, matters of dispute, and design error or design omission. And that's what it resulted in. So that's the ultimate worst case example. But that same scenario reduced down to a dozen RFIs or 50 RFIs. There was a high school over in Brentwood that was built about 15 years ago. And I remember when the project was over, the contractor filed bankruptcy. And we later found out they had over 4,000 RFIs. Quality of drawings means everything. And if that language in there means the A&E has the ultimate authority, you want to read that very carefully, because that could affect your ability to finish the job. What's the impact? Well, the more sophisticated you are, and the more you can read into this, if you see something you don't like, you just might consider not bidding the job. We have at least a half a dozen jobs a year that we take out plans and specs, and we spend a day or two looking through them, and then we say, you know what? This is not a good job for us to bid. These are bad drawings, and the language in the general conditions is not in our best interest. So thank you, but we're going to pass. One of those onerous language in the general condition can be a red flag that on the liquidated damages. What are liquidated damages? Again, that's lawyer talk for penalties. And a liquidated damage is a fixed cost per day that you will be back charged for every day you go past the contract completion date. They all have them. There are very few projects that are bid anymore that don't have LDs, liquidated damages. My point that you might want to think about is, how big are they? Well, I use it as, I think it should be at a proportion and reflective of the value of the contract. Give me a minute here. In other words, if you're bidding a job in the $5 to $10 million range as a general contractor, and the LDs on this particular project are $10,000 a day, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to bid a job with that excessive of an LD stipulated. That's just too much risk. There's too many things that can go wrong. And ever since COVID has affected the supply chain and the recession of 08 put so many subcontractors out of business, it's been tougher and tougher to meet schedules, particularly when they are aggressive schedules or schedules that are not realistic. But one thing about general contractors, we are the ultimate risk takers. So we're out there bidding the jobs, even though there's high risk involved. So if the LDs are excessive in comparison to the value of the contract, then you need to bid in the cost of LDs to your price. So what do I mean by that? Well, we take a look at the job. We know their schedule is aggressive, and we finish bidding it in the normal manner. And then we have a line item for a contingency that said, what happens if we don't finish on time? Because the probability is probably in the 60 to 80% range that we will not finish on time. The generator is a long lead item. The PG&E, we found out that they haven't done any, haven't set up any will service letters to bring in power. It's just a whole bunch of stuff. And these damages are just way too much. But other than that, we think we look at the people we're bidding against, and they're all seasoned players, all of us. So the odds are very high that all of us will take that into account. And when we do that, we say, well, let's suppose when we finish, we better allow 30 days of liquidated damages. At $2,000 a day, we'll add $60,000 to our price. Now, if that sounds a little weird to you, welcome to the real world, because that's what contractors do when the drawings and specifications and the contract language provides that kind of penalty. So that's the impact. If they're too much and you still want to bid the job, you want to consider bidding in the cost of the LDs into your price. Next slide. So summary tips for this is, number one, read the plans and specs thoroughly. And I mean read them and understand them. And for you subcontractors, I'm gonna say this twice. Read the general conditions. Read the general conditions. Everything in Division 1, and they all have the same specifications format. Every project does. It's called the master format. In those general conditions, everything that the general has to comply with, the subcontractor has to comply with as applicable. So everything from insurance to liquidated damages to the RFI process to the markups allowed on change orders to the prevailing wage and certified pay, anything and everything that's in the general conditions applies to the subcontractors. And I know some of you might have questions about that, and I'll be happy we're happy to discuss it this morning. Number two, attend the pre-bid walk and ask questions. Read your plans and specs thoroughly and get a feel for the job. Do the Google Map overview and then make sure you show up. I know with COVID that they've done the virtual walks, which I think is a bunch of BS. There's no way you can do a pre-bid walk on Zoom. It's just, you lose the impact and the effect. So maybe you can call the owner and say, I'll go over there by myself. I'll wear my mask and I'll do it when nobody's around. But bid walks, I hope that they come back to being in person. Anyway, be there and ask questions. We have a pre-bid RFI process where any questions you have that are detailed and technical, send it in writing to the architect, the engineer, and ask for clarification. Then they're obligated to put out an addendum that lists all the questions and their responses. Again, research the owner. If this is your first time bidding with this particular agency, do a little background check on them. And again, be sure to double check the general conditions And sometimes, well, too often the subs don't, and they don't know about this compressed schedule. So as for those of you who are bidding as a prime, it's your obligation to let the subs know, hey, you know what, this job is, they're allowing half the normal time. So you make sure that you've got either enough people to do it within the schedule or bid some overtime, because if it takes you longer to do this than normal, the overtime has got to be put into the bid. We don't get change orders for labor overruns or overtime. We don't get a change order, just like we don't get a change order for the cost of increase in the cost of materials. So there's the there's my summary on this. And as I said when I started this an hour ago, this process, this evaluation of the plans and the specs and the owner and the architect engineer, this process of assessing it and analyzing it and deciding what risk filters back to you as the contractor, that's a learned skill. And the more jobs you bid, the more jobs you build, the more you add to your toolbox. But these points that I've brought up this morning are something that everyone should be aware of. And I will tell you right now, absolutely, every general contractor and larger subcontractor that I know have been doing this throughout their career. You have to, or you won't survive. So with that, I'll keep quiet and listen to your questions, and I welcome a discussion.
Sorry, it took a second to get unmuted there. Thanks, Ed, so much for that presentation. Like I said, we are going to have a Q&A. Just want to mention that this is session number 2 of a 3-part series. The last session on managing your first project will be a bit longer. I believe it's going to be 90 minutes. Is that right, Ed? And that will be taking place on Tuesday, April 27th. And in fact, yes, so this coming Tuesday at 10 in the morning. So if you liked what you heard today, go ahead and check that one out as well. Then we've got 2 other webinars in the immediate future, one on SAM, that's Assistant for Award Management, and one on the WOSB certification, Women-Owned Small Business. That's on May 6th and May 11th, both at 10 a.m. So do take a look at those. We've got tons of webinars coming up. We're always planning more, so keep updated on our website, norcalptech.org/calendar. Okay, let us get to the Q&A. I don't see any questions in the Q&A yet. You guys have been an awfully quiet bunch. If you have any questions about anything that Ed said today, we'll just give you some time to type it into the chat, type it in the Q&A. Anita says she's typing, so we'll certainly be patient. I know it takes a while for some of the questions to form.
No problem, Anita.
And as I mentioned before, Ed is one of our procurement specialists, and he's our public works specialist. So if you're in this field and you want to apply for PTAC, you can specifically request him on your application. That's how I will know that he's the best fit for you. So you remember to request him, and you indicate that you're working in public works construction. Those 2 things will be indicative to me that you'd be a good fit for Ed. So I do hope to see your application. Okay, looks like we have a question from Lenita here.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, Lenita. It's a question that every sub should ask.
Ed, let's go ahead and read it aloud. Lenita says,
so with multiple subs and LDs at, let's say, $2,000 per day, how does the GC flow that down? Well, the good news is it doesn't automatically flow down to you unless you have a part, you are, how can I put this? Unless you are partially or wholly responsible for the delayed completion date. So for example, let's say you are the plasterer and the job moves along on schedule, and it comes to the time where the building's all wrapped up, people are working indoors, but the plastering isn't done. And until the plastering's done, they can't do their painting, and they can't finish any part of the exterior. And you don't show up for 2 or 3 weeks. And when you finally show up and you get the thing done and the job finishes up, and it turns out to be 5 days past the schedule. Well, let's use 10 days. It's nice, easy math. So it's $2,000 a day times 10 is $20,000. Okay, scenario A. If there were no other delays on the critical path, which will be monitored literally weekly and certainly monthly, the prime should have been letting you know with that looks like you're the only one holding up the job. So if that proves to be the case, and it will take a hearing and an analysis, but let's say for sake of argument, you are the only one that held up the job and it finished 10 days late, you're going to be the general is going to give you a $20,000 back charge. That's the worst case scenario. But let's say you held up the job by showing up late. The painter showed up late, and the glass and glazing people showed up late. Well, every general worth their salt is tracking every sub's progress on the critical path. And they will assign, it will clearly show who showed up late and how their lateness impacted the final completion. So if at the end of that analysis, it's shown that you were 50% responsible and the other two were 25%, you're going to get hit with 10,000. They're going to get hit with 5,000 each. In other words, they're allocating the proportional delay. As a good sub and as a good business person, you also need to be involved in that process, because let's say the prime contractor who's doing the site work and the final landscaping or some other issues, and they didn't do their work. So everybody gets involved. And the most complicated cases, if the $20,000 is what the owner is charging the general, the $20,000 gets spread around. What is not supposed to happen is that a subcontractor who did their work on time within the CPM schedule on the critical path and can prove, I never held up the job, you should not be participating in any part of the $20,000 back charge. I think that should answer your question.
All right, thanks, Ed.
J.L. Bay, great presentation, thank you. With varying general conditions and specs, what do you recommend for subcontract language to cover the GCs when using a standard subcontract? Are you talking about, James, are you talking about the language that you put in your subcontract that you want the subcontractor to sign? You can put whatever language you want in there. I strongly recommend, and most generals are moving towards this I'm drawing a blank here. DocuServe, I think, is the name of the agency. There's an organization now that puts out standard subcontracts, and they've written a subcontract that most generals are using, because it's the most fair to the sub, yet it protects the general in the best manner possible. I think you also might be talking about the flow down clause. Well, the flow down clause is simply that what I said is that everything that I have to be responsible to the owner for, everything flows down to you, and that's a standard. That's a standard clause that's in there. I recommend that you do the following. Go to any of the big players. Go to any of the big players, the general contractors that are doing all the work around the Bay Area. Everybody from the highway contractors like Bay Cities and De Silva Gates, O.C. Jones, to the general contractors like Devcon and well, all the generals out there that are doing the majority of these. They all are posting their subcontract on their website. And that'll give you, if you want to fine tune your subcontract, take a look at what a couple of the big boys are doing, print it out and have your attorney look at it. And if you want to edit it, customize it for you, that's done all the time. Those subcontracts are not a copyrighted document. You can take a look at ours. You can take a look at any contractor that as long as they post them if they post them on the website, they're fair game. So I would recommend that you do that. Okay, Daniel, you mentioned when talking about LD that since contractors are seasonal, they factor LD cost into the bid. What you meant with seasonal contractor?
There's a second question there as well, I might specify. What I could do is I can allow Daniel to clarify the question. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that needs to be clarified.
All right, Daniel, you're free to unmute yourself and ask the question aloud.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Or maybe I hear you wrong. You were talking about that since the LDs sometimes are very high, sometimes the contractor include in the bid a few days times the LDs just to cover. But maybe I heard you wrong where I heard saying something, yeah, we are seasonal contractors and that's why they do it that way. And I don't know if I hear you right or not.
I think you heard it wrong, Daniel. And just what I'm talking about is simply that if you take a look at that particular job and you see that the schedule's a little tight and as a prime contractor, you have this gut feeling that you're not going to finish in time. All I'm saying is you have to make a guesstimate as to how many days you think you will be late. And depending on your comfort level, depending on how good you think your estimate is and your analysis of the schedule, then you put in that amount. And it's not 30 days, it's whatever it happens to be. You might be thinking, well, I can finish this job pretty close to the completion time, but I want a 2-week cushion. I'm gonna put 2 weeks worth of delay. And so you take 15 times the $2,000 a day or whatever it happens to be. This is not a quantity that you can guarantee. You might finish on time. And if you finish on time, if you got the money in there for a delay, you're a low bidder, you get the job, you build the job, and you finish on time. Well, guess what? You got 15 days of bonus that you put in there, LDs that you're not going to be assessed. The owner, by the way, the owner doesn't know that you're doing this. They don't like to hear that, but that's business. Not all of us bid delays into our job. We only do it on the jobs that look risky.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. Daniel, you also asked about how can you get information about the actual schedule from the general? Do you bid normally as a sub?
Yes, I am a small guy, so but usually the general give you a window for you to accomplish the work. But when you were explaining about this situation, sometimes they have internal meetings with the owners and subs doesn't participate on them. So sometimes you don't know exactly the actual.
Well, here's what's supposed to happen, and it's going to be a function. It's going to be a function of how aggressive you are. You need a copy of the schedule. They're supposed to send you. A good general contractor sends a copy of the first day proposed schedule. They send that to every subcontractor with their subcontract. You should be looking at the schedule when you receive your subcontract. And then during the as the job rolls along, you should be getting a copy of the schedule every month, just one copy, and they can send it to you in an email as like Microsoft Project, and you can take a look at it and see where you fit, and see how you're. And I really, this is one of the things I talk about in my project management class. You all of you subcontractors, you need to do your part, and you need to stand up for yourself. By that, I mean, you can't be operating blind. You may be going along and thinking that you're doing everything fine and you're within the schedule, and then 3 months later down the road, you find out that they say, well, you held us back there. We thought you were going to be done in 2 weeks, and you took 3 weeks, and nobody let you know about that. Well, you need to request a copy of that schedule every month, because the general has to update it for the owner every month, and it's going to show where you fit. And the only way that you're going to protect your interest is if you stay involved. And asking for the schedule is not he's not overdoing it. That you have absolutely every right to get a copy of that schedule. And any general contractor who refuses to give you a copy of the schedule, I'd be very leery about somebody that refuses to give you a copy of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lenita, Ed, you gave great insight into the high LDs. Is there an unwritten industry standard percentage for these fees? $10,000 per day may be excessive versus $2,000 based on the project. I recognize this may vary regionally. I'd like to know your thoughts. Well, liquidated damages, there's an interesting history about them. For years, and this goes back to the 50s when my father started the company and when we first started getting into it, even before I came to work for the company. The word was penalty. And they said the contractor will be assessed a penalty of X dollars a day for late completion. And some educated contractor got an attorney and said, wait a minute, if you're going to write into our contract a penalty, then you have to put in a bonus. You have to say that if I finish 5 days early, I get $2,000 a day extra for finishing early. And of course, the industry and the owners and the agencies, public works agencies, their attorney says, well, we don't want to do that. because these guys will break their necks getting done early, and we'll be wind up giving them money all the time. Half, 3/4 of the jobs will miraculously start finishing early. So the attorneys came up with the concept of liquidated damages. And a liquidated damages is a preset, pre-agreed to amount per day cost that the owner and the contractor agree, this is what it will cost me as an owner if you finish late. So the bad news about LDs is that it's a fixed price. The good news about LDs is you cannot be assessed more than and I use the number 2,000. You can't be assessed more than that daily amount per day. They can't do it. It's supposed to compensate them for more fees from the architect, more fees from the engineer, more fees for the construction manager, the delay of use that they're not getting their new building, etc. So what typically comes up is that for jobs like a school, fire station, police station, office building, county office building, then the range it's arbitrary, but they typically run from $1,000 a day for the little jobs to maybe $5,000–6,000 a day for the bigger buildings. To give you an example of what they mean when they say, well, this is what it's cost us, let's go over to the airport. Now, when a job is bid for the airport, remember, that airport has to operate literally 20 hours a day. It only shuts down between 1 in the morning and 4 in the morning. So when they do paving out on the tarmac and the runways, and they have to redo it, when they shut it down, and the contract, they say the liquidated damages for not finishing by 5 a.m. are going to be $50,000 an hour. Well, the big guys that bid those jobs, they know that, they understand it, and I don't know if they put that into their bid or not. It's an assessment. I mean, it's a risk that they know they have to take. So they'll figure out, can we pave? Can we do those runway repairs in 4 hours? Well, they know better than I do. But my point here is that those liquidated damages are not unreasonable, because if they don't open back up at 5 a.m., they've got 200 airplanes circling all over the Western United States, either having to circle and burn up fuel or having to be diverted to other airports. So the LD is totally appropriate for the risk and cost involved that the owner could suffer if the contractor doesn't finish on time. Does that answer your question?
All right, so Lenita has a clarification there, Ed, if you want to.
Yeah, that mutual agreement and knowing other factors being considered when determining these fees helps with digesting this information. Yeah, you have to, again, I know I sound like a broken record, especially to those of you who have attended my other workshops. Everything that we're going to have to comply with is listed in those general conditions. And that's why I make such a big deal about telling you, you have to read the general conditions as well. I've got a couple of clients here with Norcal PTAC that are struggling with contracts that they've gotten because they didn't read the general conditions and they didn't realize they have other things to do besides build the project, their portion of the project. It's just so critical that you do that. And you need to take a look at the job as a whole. So many subs take a microscope view And then they say, well, all I'm doing is this one little piece of the work. Okay, well, if it's really small, that may be okay. But if you're a plasterer, a painter, a glass and glazing contractor, a roofer, a landscaper, you need to look at the whole job. You need to look at the whole job. And I cover a lot of that extra stuff in my advanced workshops on estimating and bidding, because we could spend hours on the things that you have to be aware of and the pitfalls that you can run into, because as I said, when it's all said and done and you turn in the bids and you're low, it's over. I mean, you're stuck with whatever price you put in and whatever the contract is, it's all done. There's not going to be any do-overs. So you need to be aware of that. It's public works. That's the way the system operates.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for questions now. Thanks those of you who have stayed late. Thanks for coming today, and we hope to see you at the third event, which is on Tuesday the 27th, same time at 10 a.m. And like I said, check out our website, give me a call, give me an email. We're happy to help out. And of course, thanks so much to Ed for answering all these questions and putting on the time and research to put this together.
Yeah, just one more comment, just to tell you that you folks that were in attendance, I appreciate your being here. And remember, that's what Norcal PTAC pays me for, is to be here and be your resource. Please feel free to email me at any time or schedule a personal visit. Now that COVID is loosening up, I also do a lot of one-on-one consultations with any subcontractor or general contractor that wants help of any nature. If I can help, I'll do it.
Thanks, Ed. All right, everyone. See you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.